everybody. I hope you're all doing well. Today, we're going to be continuing on or passing on the mic with today's topic, burnout. I would like to provide brief introductions of each other, so I'll start first. My name is Jose Bergmejo. I'm currently a first year student, almost a second year student in the educational counseling program, and I am feeling horrible right now.
Okay, guys. Hello, my name is Diana. I'm also first year student. And I can also ditto what you said, Jose. We just had our last lecture and I'm feeling the rush right now, the finals rush.
Okay, I can go next. Hi everyone. My name is Yridia. I'm also a first year. And retweet, I am feeling it. Things are piling up and there's a lot of work. So I'm also feeling it. But I'm happy to be doing this podcast and talking a little bit about burnout.
Okay, and my name is Lewis. I'm also a first year, and I pretty much agree with what everyone else has shared so far. I definitely think we are all due for a break after this pretty stressful time of like the semester. So we're just trying to push through.
And what's funny about that, Lewis, is that you mentioned that we're gonna have a break, but in reality, that break is really just like 1 week or a couple days at best.
Yes, I was gonna say that. I don't know if you guys saw in the group me, but someone said we start classes May 16th. I almost threw my phone across the room. I was like, what? No.
That was me actually.
No. Like, I'm super real. I was like, what?
Yep, we start May 16, guys. We only have literally like, we have this, I know we were done with like our last lecture class, but we're really not done because we're still like dealing with life, work, and finishing up our final assignments, which we all have the same ones and we all know there's a lot of writing to do. So in reality, we don't really have a break. Technically it's like a week, but it's not really much,
It really isn't. Like, it's really just, all right, you have a break from school, but you still have to take care of your GA ships, your interns, or your job site. So in reality, it's more like you get a couple hours at best.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like, well, personally, like, I think for me, like, this year has just been like a lot to like take in, and like, like all of us being like in our first year of like graduate school, like it's been a lot to like adjust to, and like just like figuring out like our routines, like what works for us. And so I feel like a week definitely isn't enough time to like process everything. We're kind of like being like thrown right back into like the swing of things. So I think that's definitely something to kind of like keep in mind when we're talking about like grad school and like what burnout is.
Yes, I agree. Like 1 week, I'm gonna be trying to get like my life together, finally clean my space, and just do everything that I have not been doing. So definitely, I don't think 1 week is enough. But I think that's why this podcast is just a really good idea to talk about how we can, deal with all of this burnout and like, just like a real solid break and what that looks like. So I'm really happy to be doing this podcast and talking about burnout.
Me too.
And in case I guess folks don't know what burnout is, I don't know, does anyone want to read the definition of burnout?
I can do that for you. So according to the World Health Organization, I believe this was in 2019, the current definition of burnout is just a feeling of energy depletion or exhaustion. It can be related to increased mental distance from one's job, feelings of negativism, or cynicism related to one's job, and reduced professional efficacy. Now, I know this really puts an emphasis more on like work, but I feel like this can relate a lot more to.
Nah, it's very real. It's right? Yeah, it can relate to us for sure. For me, I think we always talk about, like in grad school, we talk about burnout and self-care. But if I'm being completely transparent, I don't think I've ever felt burnout. Like, I think the times that I did, in undergrad were not really burnt out. I was just probably overwhelmed. But I actually had my first experience with dealing with burnout, and I didn't even know I was experiencing burnout. And it happened recently too, when I went to NASPA actually in Boston. And it's so funny that I didn't notice, but someone else had to point it out to me when I was sharing um, what I was experiencing at the time. And so for me, the way that my body was telling me that I was experiencing burnout was through food. So for example, I didn't want to eat. Like I think I was it's not that I didn't want to eat, but it's just like nothing se me antojaba, you know, like we were out in Boston, and then everybody was like, yeah, I'll get this. And then I'm just looking at the menu and I'm like, I'm not really hungry. And then I'm like, I'm looking at Kaylee, because Kaylee was like always kind of next to me, and I'm like, Kaylee, are you hungry? She's like, no, I'm not hungry. And I'm like, do you want to split a plate? And she's like, yeah, we'll split a plate. So I think we did that like at least 2 or 3 times when I was there. And I didn't know why. And I kept questioning myself, I'm like, why am I not hungry? Like I haven't had a good meal, you know? And I was in Boston. I should have been like enjoying my time over there in the conference in NASPA, but I wasn't. I mean, I did eventually, but I just didn't know that I was experiencing burnout. Um, and now I know that's how my body reacts. I think people react differently. This is how I reacted, and I didn't know, but my body was already telling me. And then when I was telling them, I was like, yeah, I was doing this, you know, and they were like, you were experiencing burnout. You didn't even know. I was like, wow, that's crazy.
And like that's really cool that you bring that up, because like I remember you were mentioning about this like maybe a couple of weeks ago. We're like, oh, this would make a good topic for our podcast, which was like, all right, cool. The more the merrier. We can like bring this up. And
Yeah.
like when you brought it up, honestly, my first response was that I didn't view that as burnout. I just thought of like, at least from like my own personal experience, if I don't eat, it's probably because like I'm nervous or I'm just not like comfortable with my environment. So I was just thinking like, oh, maybe because of that, I don't want to eat because I'm not sure, and like everything feels a bit nervous. But
Yeah.
not realizing that those could be potential side effects of burnout that you were experiencing while you were over there in Boston.
Mhm.
Which, yeah, I hope you had plenty of fun. I know you showed me lots of photos of what you were doing over there. So for all
Yeah.
those potential listeners, Boston's a good place to go to for conferences.
Yeah. I think honestly, it was just the first couple of days, like, and then I had to travel. So so I arrived there like around midnight, and then that same day at like around 5:30, I woke up because I had to get ready to head to New York because we drove to New York. And so I was also lacking sleep. So all of that in combination with my burnout, was, obviously it wasn't like a good combination. And so I was definitely feeling it. But when I think after like having a good rest after that day, like I think obviously I felt a little better, but I was still like with that whole like, oh, lack of appetite, you know? And I think a lot of people like, yeah, like you said it in the definition, it's like feelings of our energy, like we just feel exhausted. And it is true. There's different ways that people do feel exhausted. And I think for me, at least now I have stopped. I'm not a napper. That's one thing about me. I don't take naps. I can take naps, and I hate myself for that because I wish I could take naps. But I just can't, And so recently, the last couple of days, I've been taking small little naps, and I'm like, is it because I'm tired? Because I'm doing 2 internships and I'm doing grad school as a full-time student. Like, am I not having enough time for myself? Like, is this another way that my body's telling me you need to have a break? So because I don't take naps, and now I've been taking naps for at least this last week. I took naps twice.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of glad that you brought that up of like, kind of like the workload that you've like taken on as part of like being a grad student. I think that's why I had like a lot of anxiety coming into like grad school with like, there's like this like grad culture that's so like normalized with like having to kind of, be productive all the time and, speaking to like people who are already in the program, they talked about like having like multiple like GA ships and things like that. And like, I couldn't help but feel like, oh, okay, like, am I gonna like not be doing something right if I'm not doing like the same thing as them? And I think it sucks because then you like start comparing yourself to other people, and like, obviously what works for someone isn't gonna exactly always work for like someone else. So it's like really having to like be in tune like with like your own needs specifically. But I feel like that sometimes is like easy to kind of like lose grasp of, if that makes sense.
Totally, 100%. I agree with you. I hope whoever listens to our podcast, maybe the next cohort, just know that just because, other members in your other cohort mates are, doing this, doing that, that doesn't mean that you have to do it yourself too, have some grace on yourself. Everybody works different. And honestly, you know yourself better than anyone. So you know what you can handle and what you can't handle. So for me, I know that right now I'm doing 2 GA ships. But that's only like a temporary thing. Like one of my assignments is gonna assign because I transitioned from one position, one district to another district. So it's not like I'm going to be doing it forever. So I will have some time off. And honestly, having that time off, it's really important for me. Like just having that day off is very important for me because I get to do a lot of things. I get to either catch up on work, have some self-care time for myself, because I've never valued how much self-care um, is important now than any time before when I was an undergrad. But I also understand that self-care can also be a luxury for a lot of students. So it's kind of like a kind of give or take situation,
I agree. Maybe something to also add on to that, like maybe for students that aren't able to have those self-care days off, like a full day dedicated to themselves. This just came up as a thought, but what if it's just a moment of trying to realize what they do throughout their day or throughout the week that allows them to feel a sense at ease. Like you may not have a full day dedicated to yourself, but what if like going to a dentist appointment or your doctor's appointment is your form of self-care? Like, oh, now I have my own time dedicated to myself to focus on my personal self, on how I can grow, and then like maybe afterwards I'll reward myself with a treat. Like that can be some form of self-care, although it's limited depending on how long the session is. That could be seen as a way of trying to help out. But I think like it just kind of gives this idea that a full day or full day of self-care has to result in like I need to go out and do fun activities, like I need to go do all these fun and exciting things, when in reality it could just be like the small things in your life that also contribute to that as well, without feeling too left out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think another thing that people don't really realize, especially like grad students, your health comes first, no matter what. And I think what you said, like even just going to the dentist appointment, like it's a huge thing. You never know, like those cavities in the long run, if you don't take care of them, are become a bigger problem, So yeah, I mean, for me, self-care, the way how that looks right now, is me going and getting my nails done. That's my manicure. It's my healthcare, like my self-care.
I think you guys brought up like a good point. Like, we kind of have to look beyond like some of like the titles or like roles that we carry. So like such as like, being students, obviously we're in school, we're working towards getting like this master's degree, but it's like sometimes we forget that like, like at our simplest, like we're literally like people, we're human beings, like we have basic needs that need to be met. And sometimes I feel like that gets overlooked when it comes to just like education, because we're kind of expected to kind of just like give ourselves to always constantly like working, and it's a lot to like take on. And kind of like referencing what Jose mentioned earlier, like, you know, we hear about self-care, and I think a lot of times it gets romanticized, or like there might be misconceptions around like what self-care actually is. Like, you know, like I think in like social media, or just, you know, like you always hear about like, oh, I'm gonna do like a face mask, or I'm gonna like take like a bubble bath, and like sure, that could be part of like self-care, and like that is like a nice way to treat yourself. But I think, you know, there's other ways to like find like there's other mediums to like explore. Like self-care isn't always pretty, I guess I want to say.
Like treat yourself.
Yeah, like I think definitely like treating yourself could be a big thing, and like that's something that I personally do, is like, oh, I'm gonna cook myself like my favorite meal today for dinner, because that's just something that I feel like I deserve.
Yeah.
But you know, I think like this conversation, like it kind of goes hand in hand with maybe like mental health to an extent. Like there's like this like mental burnout. At least for me, that's kind of how it's like shown up before in the past. And I think for me, like when I really like realized that like things were just kind of getting like too out of control, like it took me a while to like process and like come to like this like realization that like, okay, I'm like facing like mental burnout, and like I like acknowledge that I was like isolating myself. I think that's the way that I sort of kind of like detach. I just like kind of like cut myself off from people, and like it's a bad thing to do, because then people are like wondering like what's going on with this person. But that's like kind of what feels comfortable for me, and like it really has been a process for me to like look into that, and like kind of just like do like inner work basically. And I don't like share this like with a lot of people, but like, you know, I've been in therapy now for like over a year, and I feel like that's been like a very big part of like my sort of like understanding of like who I am, and just like my relation to like burnout. So I just like wanted to like put that out there too, is that like, you know, I think self-care isn't always going to be like this like grand gesture, or like it isn't always pretty as like it's made out to be.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I know sometimes it's not easy to, you know, for a lot of us, especially like in culture, you know, like when we talk about therapy, it's like something that's kind of frowned upon, you know, to talk about that kind of stuff. But I'm proud of you, Lewis. I also started like therapy recently too. Actually, I started last semester for the very first time, and believe it or not, this program was part of the reason why I started therapy, and not because, you know, I was overwhelmed or anything. It was just more like there's a lot of triggers that I knew I had, that I know that I still have. And so, you know, thankfully we have amazing professors in our program who are always like really talking about like ways for us to improve, you know, as professionals. And, you know, I think last semester Dr. Mosqueda said, you know, like, how do you expect to help students that are going to come into your office and share stories that are probably resemble yours, and you're not going to be able to help them because you haven't worked out yourself those triggers yet, you know? So for me, those words were very like they really stuck with me, and I had to hear it again from Dr. Mesa. You know, he's like, go to therapy, you know, if you really, really know that you have, you know, triggers, and you really want to make sure you want to help the students, make sure you go to therapy. Take care of yourself first before you start advocating for these students, because if not, then you're being kind of a hypocrite. That's what he said, you know, like, so you know, I decided to do therapy too. And honestly, it's been a great experience. For me at least.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Diana and Louis. I feel like I agree. I resonate with a lot of what everyone has said so far. And I definitely just agree that burnout looks different for everyone. And self-care looks very different for everyone. Like I think it was Louis who said, like, you know, for some people it might just be like that one day out of the week where they focus on themselves and do like the face mask or anything. For other people it might just be like those 10-15 minutes they get throughout the day where they're either getting on social media for a couple minutes or going outside. But I think that's really important to just remember that self-care looks different for everyone. And for some people, it looks like going to therapy. And I agree with what Diana said. I think it takes a lot of courage to go to therapy, and especially in our culture, because it can be like very much frowned upon. But I've also gone to therapy in the past. I've also dealt with like extreme burnout, especially during community college, where like it was bad. It was so bad. Like at one point I was working and I started stuttering and I just stopped and I was like, oh, this is bad. Like something has to change in like my schedule, something has to change in my lifestyle, because it hadn't just started affecting me like mentally, but also physically. And it was that like moment where I had to take a step back and like just really reflect on how I was living and like what I was doing. But I'm also trying to be like kind to myself, because honestly there's a lot of stuff like, you know, in my life where it wasn't, you know, things just weren't my choice, and that's just how life is. But yeah, so I just wanted to say that for me it was also very much a different experience, and I feel myself starting to burn out in graduate school, and I'm like, no, we cannot go back. Like I promised myself that I would start taking better care of myself, but I'm starting to feel it again, and I'm like, no, I don't want it to happen. So but I'm not gonna let it happen. I'm gonna take the steps that the steps that I need to take to not get to the point where it gets really, really bad. But yeah, I just want to say I appreciate you both, because I really enjoyed listening to all of your guys' stories, because sometimes it feels like it's just you like in this boat, but everyone is kind of dealing with burnout. Everyone's dealing with burnout in like their own different ways. And like Diana said, if you don't realize it, your body will tell you. Your body will tell you that something is going on and that you need to stop and you need to slow down. So I think that's also really important, just being mindful of like how one is feeling and like really listening to yourself and like to your body. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that, because I've also dealt with burnout in the past and it is not good. Not good.
Thank you for sharing, Yridia. I guess now I feel like the hypocrite because I haven't gone to therapy yet. Like I remember.
you don't
No,
have
you're
to
good.
go. Like,
yeah,
no,
you
no,
don't
no,
have to, Jose.
no, no. It's
Literally,
not.
they made me go. I was like, because when they made me go to therapy, and I was like, I don't want to go to therapy, because again, in our culture, like, and
yeah.
perhaps I don't know if I should say, I don't know, in our culture, but for many people in our culture, that's just how it is. It's very much frowned upon. And when they made me go to therapy, they were like, I was like, no, like I don't need to go. Like that's not for me. Like I'm fine. Blah 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 blah. But it's just because I had it so instilled in me that therapy was for people who were just, you know, like not okay, and that's not really
locos pa locos.
yeah, exactly. I was like, I didn't want to say it, but I'm like, girl, like back
No,
in the day,
yeah.
I was like, no, that's not for me. Like,
Yeah.
I'm fine. And they're like, no, you're not.
And then for men, it's even worse, you know? Yeah.
And I think it's safe to say that for those listening to this podcast, we all come from a Latino, Latinx background.
First gen.
First gen as well.
Woo!
We have various identities. We all share the trauma. Woo!
Yay!
Yeah. For the most part, because I think Lewis is not first gen, right, Lewis?
No, not exactly, but I kind of identify as like 1.5 gen.
Okay.
But you're still first gen.
Yeah, you're still first gen.
Yeah, I guess in a sense, there's like certain aspects that like I pretty much relate to. So
yeah, and
but,
I think that's okay. You know, like you don't have to like resonate with the entire embodiment of first gen, so long as you like. If you feel a part of something, why shouldn't you be allowed to, encompass this identity with you?
Yeah.
I guess it's just like a matter of like kind of like recognizing like your privilege and like taking up space. But there was like something else that I was gonna add that I think something that I really appreciate from our program, at least, is just kind of like how easy it is for us to like be vulnerable with one another. And I think someone like just recently like made like a point about like how like, you know, talking about like mental health, especially when it comes to like our cultures, our backgrounds, our identities, like that's kind of seen as like a taboo. And especially like, you know, as a guy, like we're not really like known to like talk about our feelings. And I found myself like feeling uncomfortable, like opening up to people. Like, you know, for anyone who knows me, like you've probably seen me in the classroom, I'm just like to myself with like a very like serious straight face. And I think that's just kind of like my way of just like trying to keep myself composed, at least like on the outside, that it's like I could be going through like something very like, you know, tough or like difficult to deal with. And it's like nobody would know because I'm not like explicitly like asking anyone for help or anything like that. And so I think that's like another realization that I've like come to have like during our time in the program so far, is that like it's okay to ask for help. And it's like, again, easier said than done, at least for me. But I think it's also just that, like, just like trusting other people when they say that they're willing to support you and be there for you, like knowing that they genuinely do mean it and that you're not like being a burden to anyone.
I agree. It's like almost like the silent scream, you can say. You know, like you're keeping quiet and you have like just a blank face. Most people just assume, at least for people outside of our cultural group, they might view you as like someone that's like, don't bother with, leave them alone. There must be something wrong with them. But like it's just this difficulty to try to express yourself for who you are as a person. And like I love that we are vulnerable in the classroom setting where we can just discuss. But what I don't appreciate is that we all need to try to like step up a bit more. Like we have this vulnerability where we're all like we have it where we can open up and talk, but it usually takes like some frequent people to bring it up in order for others to contribute. Like I love talking out loud in class, but for me, I feel like if I don't have someone to like bounce off with, which is why I'm like very appreciative of Michael Borrero. So Michael, if you listen to this, shout out to you. I love picking on you and you pick on me. We gotta share this like bond. And I think from there, at least from what I see, is that I feel that others can have that confidence to like share their own feelings and thoughts at the moment. So I would personally appreciate it, like not just for our cohort, but for other cohort mates or for the future world leaders to take a step, be the first one to speak up every now and then, because it can be helpful sometimes.
Yeah. And honestly, I think going kind of like back on what you're saying, I think, you know, even those who don't really share much in class, I'm pretty sure they're very observant. So I know that even if they don't probably share in class a lot, they'll probably know who to go to if they need to ask for help. And it's probably because, they've seen, for example, they've seen Jose, talked about these things, or, it could be Yridia, Luis, anyone, so I think in a way it's also kind of good that even if they don't step up, at least they have people like us, kind of sharing, and we kind of like, I guess I don't want to phrase it in these words, but maybe kind of like we're kind of like the voice of the voiceless, like when we share these things, because then they get to kind of like, yeah, like, hey, like I remember you shared this in class the other day, like I would like to talk about you more, like, because I think also like it's a cultural thing too. I feel like it's so embedded in us, like going back to like the whole burnout thing, it's very embedded, like we need to be doing something. We grew up in an environment, in a household where like our parents were always like grinding, they were always working or never in a casa. I'm the second oldest, but I'm the first girl. So guess who was taking care of her little brothers when my mom was at work? So I had to like learn how to do that at a very young age, take care of my siblings. And so I think it's like we kind of role model back to like how our parents used to be, and our parents were always like, working. I mean, my mom only had one job, but I know some parents, like, single parents, especially, like they have more than one job, and so they never get to see their kids, and so they're always working and grinding. And so we grow up with this mentality and this culture that we feel like we need to do the same thing, and that's why we sometimes we want to take more than what we can take. And then obviously our parents probably experienced burnout, but they probably didn't know they were feeling burnout. They just thought they were sick, you know and so
Yes, I agree, Diana.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna add on to that, but I just wanted to go back real quick to what Lewis was saying earlier, just about being like a little bit more, I guess, on the reserved side of class, or yeah, on the reserved side of our class. um I also think that like that's completely okay. I think it takes time for people to one, open up, and if it takes someone like a whole year to do that, like that's completely okay. And if they never do, that's also okay, because I
Yeah.
know I've had a lot of like feedback on whether it's like journals or discussion posts from like people who perhaps don't speak up as much, and they're so insightful, and they're always like I don't know, like I feel like I appreciate their feedback so much. Um Whether again it's like in a reflection post, or even like if it's more one-on-one. So I don't want anyone listening to this podcast to feel bad if they're not like speaking up in class, because although speaking up in class, like, it is brave and everything, showing up to class is also like just as brave.
Yeah.
And it does take like just a lot of courage to just be in the program and take up that space. And we know that when you do need to speak up, you do. And yeah, so I just wanted to mention that real quick. And then Diana, literally what you just said right now is like so spot on. I feel like our parents are just so used to like this grind culture and like burnout culture. Because sometimes I'll call my dad and then I'll tell him, I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm so busy right now. I literally don't have time to do anything. I'm just like really, really busy. And he's like, okay, qué bueno, mija. And I'm like, no, dad, I don't want to be busy. Like, I'm
That's not what I wanted
tired.
to hear.
Yeah, like I'm tired. I don't want to be busy. I'm like, literally cannot wait until I can just go to work and then not have to do anything like in the evening or in the afternoon and on the weekends. I was like, I'm tired, sir.
Yeah.
So I agree.
No, yeah. I think recently I experienced something very similar with my mom. Like my youngest brother, he's working, I don't know how many hours. He barely sleeps. And then my mom is like so proud of him because he's like,
Yeah.
yeah, like he's working this many hours and he got
Oh
promoted.
my gosh.
And I'm like, but mom, you're not seeing the real thing. You're not seeing the kid's health.
Mhm.
He's not sleeping. He's lacking sleep. Like in the long run, that's gonna hurt him. But they don't really see that, like
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
it's really hard to explain to them too, like well, at least for me, it's kind of hard because I think maybe she takes it like if I'm kind of like trying to like um llevarle la contraria, like
Mhm.
Mhm.
yeah. So so it's like, how do I explain to her without her feeling any type of way, but yeah, and then I guess the sleeping part, going back to the sleeping part, I know that I mentioned that I've been like napping and maybe it's a sign of burnout, and then how my brother is like a lack of sleep. I just want to say too, for those that are listening too, like um sleeping can also be a good thing. It could be a self-care type of way for you to like re-energize yourself, so it's not necessarily always a bad thing. It can also be a good thing.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree. I feel like that was a really good transition into like maybe just talking a little bit about like our own burnout tips. It seems
Yeah.
like everyone has dealt with burnout in many different ways, and also in like different stages in our life, because you can definitely experience burnout when you're young, when you're in high school. If you're listening to this and you're in high school, like, take care of yourself. High school is wild. Like, you're literally there from like 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. That's crazy. In college and undergrad and community college, when you're trying to transfer, you're like hustling. So take care of yourself. If you have to like spend a little extra time in community college because you have to put yourself first, like that's okay. It is your timeline. It's your journey. You'll transfer when you do. And then, you know, in graduate school, we're all juggling like so many different things. So it can definitely, you know, just happen at any stage in your life. But with that being said, I feel like we've all kind of dealt with burnout. So I don't know, maybe we can talk about some of the tips or what we've done in the past, or maybe what we've learned and we will do in the future or now to, you know, either not have to deal with burnout or not have to experience it, or how, I guess, yeah, like how do we manage it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's not we're like discussing burnout. I would say this is a bad habit, but my self plan or like my self care to manage with burnout is just going to my second job. Because for I work as a gardener on the weekends, so I help my father out every. It used to be Fridays, but it was just Saturdays and Sundays, usually from when the sun rises to the sun sets. And like, yeah, it's a lot of like physical movement, but I appreciate more of just like being surrounded by nature, a lot of like life, and being able to something about like maintaining it. It's nice. You gotta like have some space to yourself, breathe in, and I guess on the side aspect, I get like bring in another form of income to help out. Like if I can try doing that without making it into a job, I would. But if not, this is what I have to deal with. So it's kind of self-care. But I would just recommend try taking naps as much as you can throughout your days. If power naps aren't just as important, like it it helps combat taking that extra coffee throughout your day. You can just take a quick 10-minute nap, 15-minute nap when you're able to, and that can really help recover you. Like for me, when I'm at here at El Camino, like it takes me a while to come over here, so I have to leave by like maybe 6:20, 6:30ish, and I don't get there till close to 8. And I had to like really sacrifice a lot of sleep. So what I do during my lunch, I try to eat my food as quickly as possible and just take a nap. It sucks because I can't really connect with a lot of like our classmates here. I can't really talk to Ray, but I feel like I need to set a boundary for myself so that way like I may not be able to talk with him during my break, my lunch, but I'll feel better myself to continue throughout the day. And then if there's some time available, I can just go and stop by and have like a nice conversation with him. Yeah, plenty of naps when you can.
There was something in that you mentioned that I kind of resonated with like when you shared boundary, like that kind of reminded me of like a lesson that I feel like I've really had to like learn ever since I started grad school, was really having to like set boundaries for myself, and not only for myself, but even just like me in relation to other people. I think that's like a really hard thing to do when, you know, you've maybe like grown up like in an environment where you're kind of like Deanna was like mentioning earlier, like, you know, we see our parents like constantly grinding, and because maybe we had to like take on a lot of responsibilities at an early age, we become kind of selfless to the point where we kind of put our own needs on the back burner. You know, sometimes like unknowingly to ourselves. And yeah, I guess like the point that I was like trying to make here was that, you know, sometimes you might seem like you're being selfish when really all you're doing is just like advocating for yourself. So, you know, whether it be just like, I get off of work at this time, I'm not going to open my emails after that. Like, you know, I feel like that could be like a really important boundary to set for yourself because you're respecting your personal time. And I think a lot of people like might overlook that or like not really see that as being like important. But I don't know. I feel like for me, like that holds like a lot of weight. You know, I'm really big on like my personal time, you know, because time and energy are like two things that you can't get back. And so, you know, you really want to like be intentional and like value these things. So, you know, I think for me it's just like just surrounding myself with people who, you know, pour into me and that I also pour into. and just kind of like doing things for myself, like I mentioned earlier. And part of it isn't always pretty, or it isn't always easy, because I've had to set boundaries to like let people know, like, hey, like I'm not okay with this. Um, but I think once you start getting into like the habit of doing that, it becomes a lot more simpler.
Preach, Lewis. I couldn't agree with you more. I think time and energy, you don't get that back. It's so valuable and people don't realize it. Like, I think about all that stuff too. Like, even when I'm driving to Long Beach too, and like, I'm like, man, I'm spending this much in traffic. Like, I could be doing this, like I could be sleeping or something, like, but yeah, I think it's okay to be selfish, for good reasons. And I think one thing I've learned working in higher ed now, that it is okay to set your boundaries, because if you don't set them, oh Lord, you'll be, I don't know, like, I think I'll go crazy, honestly. Because I've noticed that with like higher ed, you never stop working. There's always an email coming in. There's a message in Teams coming in. And it's like, dude, it's my day off, like, but that's why I'm like, don't, like, if someone like my supervisors, whoever, emails me, texts me, or Teams me, they'll get back when I'm back at work. I'll get back to them. They'll get a response back at work, because there's no way I'm gonna work during my personal time, and personal space is very important. And I think, obviously as you grow, you don't think about these things, or you don't value the simplest things. But for me, having that day off, having those boundaries, they're very important for me. And I think there's no negotiation there for me.
That's true.
Yes, I agree. I just wanted to say, again, I resonated with what a lot of you said. I really loved, Jose, how you said that you kind of find self-care in your second job. And I think that's really important to do. I think that's a part of self-care, like finding joy in anything that you do. Because again, sometimes it's not like we have a choice when it comes to maybe like either working a lot or working a second job. So just being intentional about finding like joy and everything that you do, I also think that's like a great form of self-care. And then Lewis talked like a little bit about boundaries, and that's so important. The other day I was just thinking how like literally anyone can text me like at 10 p.m., and ask me for something. And then in my head I was like, oh, that's not okay. That's like someone like literally knocking on your door and asking you to kind of stop what you're doing and help them. I don't know if that makes sense, but it kind of hit me and I was like, I
It
don't know
does.
how I feel about
Yeah.
that. And like
Yeah.
nowadays, like I will never text anyone honestly past like 7 or 8 p.m. unless it's some kind of emergency, unless we're like friends and it's something to kind of like, I don't know, laugh or something funny. But I'll never text anyone like past 7 or 8 p.m. to ask them for like a favor or like anything like that, because I'm like, dang, that's kind of intrusive. And before I didn't really understand, how some people on their phones, they have like silence, like notification silent, something like
Oh
that.
yeah, like kind
And
of
I
like
was like,
do
what
not
is that?
disturb. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. And I didn't really understand what that was, because I was like, well, what if someone needs something? And then in my head I was like, now I'm like, no, it's so important. And like I think a couple people mentioned like being selfish is okay. I think putting your well-being and putting yourself first is like not selfish at all. Like it's just, that's just how it should be, like
Yep.
your well-being comes first. Health always comes first. So I don't know, I don't think it's like selfish, and I hope no one thinks it's selfish, because truly, like at the end of the day, like it's our health is everything. Like health is absolutely everything.
Yeah.
I guess I'll mention like some like burnout tips that I could give to folks listening. One is definitely when you start to feel it, because you'll start to feel it in different ways that you can feel it is like, one, you just begin feeling like really overwhelmed. Something that happens to me is like my patience is like in the negatives. I don't have patience for like anyone, so I feel, and I'm genuinely like, I try to be like a happy person and like a friendly person, but if I start getting like, I don't know, like not friendly, I'm like, oh, that means like I'm very stressed, I'm very anxious, I'm very overwhelmed, and I need to take a step back and like breathe and relax. But also with that, I just think being mindful of like how you spend your day, like, you know, just really scheduling in your breaks is really important to not have to deal with or to avoid burnout. Being intentional of when you spend your breaks, being intentional of how you spend your weekends. Yes, get your work done and do what you have to do, but if you have to take that L on a paper, if you have to ask for that extension, like, do it. Like, go ahead and do it. Like, academia should never come before your like mental health or your like your well-being or even your happiness, honestly. That's something that I feel like I definitely learned in undergrad, because again, I've dealt with like severe burnout, and I was like, never again. I will never let like a grade or a paper that I don't even remember writing come before like me and like my well-being. So I guess that's what I would say about like, you know, tips on burnout. Just really listen to yourself and put yourself first.
I think one thing I would do it advice or tip for everybody else who's listening to is like um you know, like for me personally, I didn't know what burnout really felt. I just thought it was more like feeling kind of low in energy, not wanting to do anything. And that could be a form, but just be aware of like how your body reacts. You know, for me, I already noted that it was like my lack of appetite. So I think when like be mindful of that now. I'm trying to be more mindful of that. So whatever your case is, be mindful of like those symptoms too. And so that like going kind of back to what Yridia said, because your health comes first, and if you don't pay attention to, you know, these signs or symptoms, they can be worse, you know, if you don't handle them. And I think another thing I would also want to add is you know, try to find a routine, you know, that will help you kind of soothe yourself, self-regulate a little bit when you're feeling a little bit burnt out. If you can do any like self-care routine, then do that. You know, if that means sleep the whole day, go ahead, take the day off and sleep the whole day. You know, that's gonna re-energize yourself. I know, at least for me, I mentioned it's getting my manicures done, because you know, I look good, I feel good, you know. But yeah, that would be my piece of advice for anybody else who's listening.
I think something that's funny, like to talk about, is that we're literally recording this late in the evening. So I guess you can say the burnout's really there, and we're really trying to get this assignment done as quickly as possible. But I think now that since we started the recording, we've started to take a slower approach. We really want to like get our voices across and just talk about our current perspectives, because you never know who might be listening to this. They might need to hear some of these words. So I would say like take what you can from our words of wisdom. You don't have to take them like directly or all, follow them step by step, but from every piece of information we're able to provide you, you can just try to create your own form of self-care and ways to manage your own burnout, while also acknowledging that you're not alone in this case. There are many others just like you who are also working towards being overall human.
Yes, period, Jose. Thank you for sharing. I guess one thing I wanted just to add to any of our classmates listening, you're not alone. I'm rooting for you. Everyone on this podcast is rooting for you. We are doing our best, and that's all that matters. And please, please, please take care of yourselves. Because we want to make it to the finish line, and we want to make it to the finish line healthy, happy, and just, being able to celebrate ourselves, because that's the goal. That's what we'll do. So I just know that we're all rooting for each other.
I've loved like what everyone has said so far. I'm like, I don't know what else I can like contribute, but I guess one last thing that I can share is just to never like abandon yourself. You're with yourself all the time, and I think someone like shared this earlier, like only you know yourself best. I think a lot of times like we're our own biggest critics, and it's kind of ironic because at the same time it's like we're also like the first people to like, or like we're like the first ones to know when there's like something wrong with us, or that usually for the most part. So it's like we kind of have to like then like look out for ourselves. But I think for me, like it's been a lot to like kind of reframe like my thinking, like okay, like I'm not taking like a lazy day, or like I'm not being lazy right now, like I'm actually just resting my body because that's what I need. And as simple as that sounds, like it's a good reminder so that we're not like beating ourselves up or like putting ourselves down, because sometimes like it feels really heavy to like carry like the weight of the world on our shoulders, and then like we're not really helping ourselves by like further like putting ourselves down by like engaging in negative self-talk. So I think being mindful of that, and yeah, definitely just like lean into like your support systems, always like pour into yourself, and definitely like be firm and like uncompromising when it comes to self-care, when it comes to like yourself, whatever that looks like that's something that should be like a non-negotiable. I know it is for me. Like I'm not willing to compromise like my rest time, because that's something that I honor, and I feel like other people can also take that advice and like apply it to themselves however they see fit.
Yeah. Really, really, thank you for sharing, Lewis.
Thank you. Yes.
All of your advice is really important. Like, so don't ever doubt yourself. Honestly, your presence alone is already more uplifting, I would say. And I would say if people are interested as well, for prospective students or current students, USC does have mental health services as well. It is included in your tuition, where you can go and seek out therapy or psychiatric help. And it's all in the matter of a push of a button or a phone call. I strongly recommend that you reach out to your USC Student Help Services, and just don't be afraid to or hesitate to call or ask for help.
Yeah, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to tell me. I'm Diana. That's how I started therapy, through school. So kind of know how to deal with the whole process. So if anybody needs any extra guidance on how to go about it, just let me know. And also, Louis, I want to go back a little bit on what you said. Like, I admire you so much. Like, you're so quiet, but when you open that mouth, you say a lot of words of wisdom. So kudos to you. Like,
I did.
Thank you.
Of
course.
Yeah, that means a lot, because I feel like I'm one of those people that like it might have been Jose, like I'm like one of those people in class. So like, I don't always speak up, or like, I'm not always like the most vocal, but I feel like I'm very intentional when I speak, and I'm glad that I can make at least like one person like feel better. But I definitely think like working with this group specifically, and just like the rest of like our cohort, like I really appreciate like what everyone has to offer, and like just like being themselves. Like it's not even like you guys are like doing anything for me, or like we're not like, we don't owe each other anything, of course, but it's like I just really appreciate like these connections. And I think slowly but surely like I'm like reaching a place where I can just like be like myself, and just like be open to like opening up more. So I appreciate that.
Of course.
Should we start to wrap up now?
Sure.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So
I loved everything that everyone just said. Honestly, like I wasn't feeling the best in the beginning of this, but my heart is so full. I'm so excited to get these papers and projects out of the way and be done. And I know when we started, I was like, those summer classes, we don't get no break. but just hearing you all and talking to you all and knowing that some of you or all of you are going to be in my classes during the summer, I'm ready, girl. Like, it's going to be good. It's going to be fun, and we're going to get it done, do it, put ourselves first, and take care of ourselves and get it done. So I'm excited. But thank you so much, everyone. This was so nice. I appreciate you all.
Thank you. We
Thank
got
you.
this. We got this. We're in it together. So who better than ourselves to know what burnout is as a grad student?
Exactly. But again, thank you all. We appreciate you. We hope you have a great day. Just know that you're loved.
Thank
Yes.
you. And this has been second season Burnout. Dr. Hernandez, politics class. Shout out to Dr. Hernandez. She a real fun.
Dr. H.
Class of 2024.
We're at the halfway mark.
Yes, we're doing it.
Yeah.
Okay. Have a great night, y'all.
Have a great night.